A grave cannot hold the past, but it can shatter the present. Julian Vance, a tech billionaire cloaked in solitude, kneels before his fiancee's tombstone, haunted by her death in a tragic crash. The autumn wind bites as he turns to leave, only to freeze when a small voice pierces the dusk. "Are you my dad?" 5-year-old Lily, eyes like sapphires, holds a locket that rips open Julian's buried grief. Why does this child carry his past? If this story stirs your heart, subscribe and share where you're watching from. Day or night, near or far. Stay with us. The truth behind her words will unravel secrets that could break or mend a soul. The wind howled through the cemetery, carrying the scent of damp earth and fading leaves. Julian Vance stood before a simple marble headstone, its inscription worn but legible. Amelia Marie Ellis, 1987-2014. Beloved forever. His tailored wool coat, black as the gathering dusk, did little to shield him from the chill that wasn't just autumn's doing. At 34, Julian was a titan of the tech world, his name synonymous with innovation and wealth. Yet here, on this cold November afternoon, he was just a man haunted by a love lost 7 years ago. The anniversary of Amelia's death always brought him back to this desolate place, where guilt and grief clung to him like shadows. He adjusted the single white rose in his hand, its petals trembling in the wind. Amelia had loved roses, their simplicity a contrast to her vibrant spirit. She'd been pregnant when the car accident stole her away, a hit and run that left Julian broken, his dreams of a family shattered on a rain-slicked highway. He placed the rose gently on the grave, his fingers brushing the cold stone as if it could carry his apology to her. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words swallowed by the wind. "Sorry for not being there. Sorry for choosing ambition over her dreams. Sorry for the life they never lived." Julian turned, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel path. The city's distant skyline a stark reminder of the empire he'd built to fill the void. His penthouse, his private observatory, his billions, none of it warmed the emptiness inside. The cemetery gate loomed ahead, rusted and creaking, when a small figure stepped from the shadows of an ancient oak. Julian froze. A girl no older than 5 stood there, her pale face streaked with dirt and tears. Her light brown hair was tangled, her thin coat too large for her frail frame. In her trembling hand, she clutched a tarnished silver locket, its surface catching the last rays of the fading sun. "Are you my dad?" Her voice was soft, almost lost in the wind, but it struck Julian like a thunderbolt. Her blue eyes, bright and piercing, locked onto his, carrying a weight no child should bear. "Mommy said you'd know this locket." Julian's breath caught. He knelt instinctively, his knees pressing into the cold earth, bringing him to her level. The locket dangled from her small fingers, its star-shaped engraving glinting faintly. It was unmistakable, the same locket he'd given Amelia on their first anniversary, a symbol of their shared love for the stars. His heart pounded, a mix of disbelief and dread. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice rough, barely masking the tremor beneath. The girl, Lily, she said her name was, clutched the locket tighter, as if afraid he'd take it. "Mommy gave it to me. She said my dad would recognize it." Her lips quivered, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "She went to heaven, and I don't have anyone else." Julian's mind reeled. Heaven, the word sliced through him, echoing Amelia's fate. But this locket, how could it be here, in the hands of a child who called him dad? He scanned the cemetery, half expecting an adult to emerge, a parent or guardian to explain this impossible moment. But the graves were silent, the wind their only voice. Lily shivered, her coat flapping uselessly against the cold. Her eyes, so like Amelia's in their intensity, held a plea that rooted him to the spot. "Where's your family?" he asked, softening his tone, though his pulse raced. "Who's taking care of you?" Lily's gaze dropped to the locket, her small fingers tracing its edges. "Just Mommy. She's gone now. The lady at our house said I had to leave." Her voice broke, a sob escaping. "I saw you here and Mommy said, she said you'd know." Julian's chest tightened. Logic screamed at him to call the police, to hand this child to the authorities. She was a stranger, a lost girl with a story that made no sense. Yet the locket, Amelia's locket burned against his memory, its star engraving a beacon from a life he'd buried. Was she a cousin, a distant relative of Amelia's he'd never met? The thought felt flimsy, but it was enough to keep him from walking away. "I'm Julian," he said, his voice steadier now. "Let's get you somewhere warm, okay? We'll figure this out." He extended a hand, careful not to touch her, letting her choose. Lily hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if weighing his soul. Then slowly, she placed her cold, trembling hand in his, the locket pressed between their palms. The drive to his penthouse was silent, the city's lights blurring past as Julian's mind churned. Lily sat in the back seat, her small form dwarfed by the leather interior, clutching the locket like a lifeline. The penthouse elevator hummed, carrying them to the top floor, where glass walls revealed a city that sparkled but offered no answers. Julian led her inside, the space vast and sterile, its sleek furniture and minimalist decor a stark contrast to her tattered coat and tear-streaked face. "You can stay here tonight," he said, gesturing to a guest room that had never been used. "Are you hungry?" Lily nodded shyly, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. He rummaged through his kitchen, finding only takeout leftovers and a carton of milk. He poured her a glass, his hands unsteady, and set it on the counter with a packet of crackers. She ate slowly, her gaze never leaving him, as if he might vanish. As Lily sipped the milk, Julian's eyes drifted to the locket now resting on the counter. Its star engraving caught the light, a silent accusation. How did this child have Amelia's keepsake? Why had she appeared on this day, of all days, at the cemetery where he mourned? The questions coiled in his chest, sharp and unyielding. He didn't know her story, but as he watched her small hands cradle the glass, he knew one thing. He couldn't let her go until he understood why fate had brought her to him. The first light of dawn filtered through the penthouse's towering glass walls, casting a golden glow across the sterile expanse of Julian Vance's home. He hadn't slept. The silver locket, its star engraving glinting accusingly on his desk, had kept him awake, its presence a ghost from a life he'd tried to bury. Julian stood by the window, coffee gone cold in his hand, watching the city stir below. The silence of the night had been broken by the soft patter of Lily's footsteps, a sound so foreign it jolted him from his thoughts. The 5-year-old girl, who'd appeared like a specter at Amelia's grave the evening before, was now a living question mark in his meticulously ordered world. Lily emerged from the guest room, her tangled brown hair framing her pale face, the oversized coat replaced by one of Julian's old shirts, its sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She clutched the locket tightly, her blue eyes scanning the vast space with a mix of awe and caution. "Good morning," Julian said, his voice softer than he intended, betraying the unease that had rooted in his chest. She nodded shyly, her gaze lingering on the city skyline beyond the glass. "It's so big," she whispered, as if the penthouse itself might swallow her. Julian gestured to the kitchen counter, where he'd set out cereal and milk, meager offerings from a bachelor's barren pantry. "Hungry?" he asked, watching her climb onto a stool, her movements careful, deliberate. As she ate, her eyes darted to him, then back to the bowl, the locket resting beside her like a talisman. The silence between them was heavy, not the comfortable quiet Julian craved, but one laden with unspoken questions. Who was she? Why did she have Amelia's locket? And why, on the anniversary of Amelia's death, had she found him? "Mommy said you like watching stars," Lily said suddenly, her voice cutting through the stillness. Julian froze, the spoon in his hand clattering against the counter. His private observatory, tucked on the penthouse's upper level, was a secret shared only with Amelia. They'd spent nights there, her laughter filling the air as they traced constellations. "How do you know that?" he asked, his tone sharper than intended. Lily's eyes widened, and she shrank back, clutching the locket. "Mommy told me," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "She said you'd keep me safe." The words pierced Julian, a mix of warmth and pain he couldn't name. He softened, kneeling beside her. "I'm sorry, Lily. I need to understand. What was your mommy's name?" Her lips trembled, but she answered, "Sarah. Sarah Thompson." The name meant nothing to Julian, a stranger's name tied to a child who knew too much. He needed answers, but Lily's tearful gaze stopped him from pressing further. Instead, he offered a small smile. Let's get you some proper clothes today, okay? And then we'll figure things out. After breakfast, Julian made a call to Mark, his private investigator, a gruff but reliable man who'd handled sensitive matters for his company before. I need you to dig into a woman named Sarah Thompson, Julian said, his voice low as he glanced at Lily, now curled on the couch with a blanket. She's deceased recently. Her daughter Lily is with me. Find out everything. Her family, her past, anything about a silver locket with a star engraving. Mark's silence on the line spoke volumes, but he agreed, promising a preliminary report by evening. As Lily napped, her small form dwarfed by the leather couch, Julian paced the penthouse, the locket now in his hand. Its weight was familiar, its edges worn from years of touch. He opened it, expecting to find the tiny photo of him and Amelia from their college days, but it was empty, the absence of fresh wound. Amelia had loved stars, her dreams of teaching children about the cosmos clashing with Julian's hunger for corporate success. Their breakup had been quiet, a slow drift of irreconcilable futures, but her death in that hit and run had shattered him. Now this child, with eyes so like Amelia's, carried a piece of that past. By afternoon, Julian took Lily to a nearby department store, her small hand gripping his as they navigated the bustling aisles. She chose a purple sweater, her first smile, a fleeting, fragile thing, warming something in Julian's chest. Mommy liked purple, she said softly, fingering the fabric. The comment, innocent yet loaded, deepened the mystery. Who was Sarah, and how did she know so much about him? The locket, now around Lily's neck, seemed to pulse with secrets. Back at the penthouse, Mark's call came as Julian watched Lily draw stars on a notepad, her concentration mirroring Amelia's when she sketched. Sarah Thompson died 3 weeks ago. Cancer, Mark said, his voice clipped. No father listed on Lily's birth certificate. No immediate family except a supposed aunt, Eleanor Thompson, who's been off the grid. The locket's origin is unclear. Nothing in Sarah's records mentions it. Julian's grip tightened on the phone. Keep digging, he said. There's something we're missing. As night fell, Julian sat by the observatory's glass dome, the city's lights a distant constellation below. Lily joined him, her locket glinting as she pointed to a star. Mommy said you named one for someone special, she whispered. Julian's heart stuttered. He'd named a star for Amelia, a private vow known only to her. The impossibility of Lily's knowledge, the locket's presence, and Sarah's shadow loomed larger, pulling him toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. As he tucked Lily into bed, her small hand warm in his, Julian felt a bond forming, a fragile thread of care that both terrified and anchored him. Tomorrow he'd push harder for answers, but tonight he'd guard this child who'd stumbled into his life, carrying echoes of a love he'd lost. The soft scratch of Lily's pencil filled the penthouse, a quiet counterpoint to the city's hum beyond the glass walls. Julian Vance leaned against the counter, watching the 5-year-old girl sketch stars on a notepad, her purple sweater a splash of color in the stark living room. Days had passed since he'd taken her shopping, since her cryptic words about stars and the locket had stirred ghosts in his heart. The silver locket, now a constant around Lily's neck, glinted as she tilted her head, her blue eyes focused, yet distant. Julian's phone sat silent, Mark's promised report on Sarah Thompson still pending, leaving him in a limbo of questions. Who was Sarah? How did she know his secrets? And why did Lily, this fragile stranger, feel so achingly familiar? The penthouse, once a fortress of solitude, had softened with Lily's presence. Her drawings littered the coffee table, and a small stack of children's books, bought on impulse, sat nearby. Julian hadn't planned this, hadn't wanted it, but her quiet trust, her shy smiles, had begun to chip away at his defenses. He sipped his coffee, the bitter taste grounding him as he wrestled with the urge to protect her and the logic that demanded answers. The locket, Amelia's locket, was a puzzle he couldn't solve alone, yet every glance at Lily's face, those eyes so like Amelia's, made him hesitate to involve the authorities. The doorbell's sharp chimes shattered the moment. Julian stiffened, his pulse quickening. Visitors were rare. His assistant screened everyone. Lily looked up, her pencil pausing, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Stay here," Julian said gently, squeezing her shoulder before crossing the room. Through the peephole, he saw a woman, gaunt, middle-aged, with sharp eyes that belied her weary expression. Her coat was threadbare, but her posture was calculated, poised. Julian opened the door, his instincts on edge. "Mr. Vance," the woman said, her voice smooth but tinged with rehearsed grief. "I'm Eleanor Thompson, Lily's aunt. Thank you for taking care of her." Her words were warm, but her eyes were cold, scanning him like a predator sizing up prey. Julian's grip tightened on the doorframe. "How did you find us?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. Eleanor's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The landlord mentioned a kind man who helped Lily. I've been frantic, searching everywhere." She clutched a worn purse, her knuckles white. "Lily's mother, my sister Sarah, passed recently. I'm her only family now." Her voice cracked artfully, but something in her delivery, a practiced cadence, set Julian's nerves alight. He glanced back at Lily, who'd retreated behind the couch, her small hands clutching the locket, eyes wide with suspicion. "Come in," Julian said, stepping aside, his mind racing. He led Eleanor to the living room, where she perched on the edge of a chair, her gaze flickering to Lily. "Sweetheart," she called, her tone syrupy, "come give your auntie a hug." Lily didn't move, her body half hidden, her expression a mirror of Julian's unease. Eleanor's smile faltered, then recovered. "She's been through so much," she said, turning to Julian. "Sarah was obsessed with your work, Mr. Vance. She followed your career, filled Lily's head with stories. That's probably why she thought you were her father." Julian's jaw tightened. Sarah's obsession? It didn't explain the locket or Lily's knowledge of his observatory. "Lily's been safe here," he said, his voice measured. "She's still adjusting. Maybe we should give her time before moving her." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. "Of course. I just want what's best for her. We've had a hard time. Money's tight since Sarah got sick." Her pause was deliberate, a hint of expectation in her tone. "I can help with that," Julian offered, sensing her angle. "Whatever Lily needs. Clothes, food, anything." He watched her closely, noting the flicker of satisfaction in her expression. "Thank you," she said, her voice dripping with gratitude. "I'll check in soon. She's all I have left." As she stood to leave, her gaze lingered on Lily, who remained frozen behind the couch, her fingers white around the locket. The door closed and Julian knelt beside Lily. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, but her eyes were distant, haunted. "I don't like her," she whispered, barely audible. "She's not like Mommy." Julian's chest tightened. He didn't like her either. Not her sharp eyes, not her too-perfect story. He pulled out his phone and called Mark. "Eleanor Thompson showed up," he said, keeping his voice low. "Claims she's Lily's aunt. Dig deeper. Her finances, her history, everything. Something's off." That night, as Lily slept in the guest room, her locket on the nightstand, Julian sat in his observatory, the stars above a reminder of Amelia's laughter. Eleanor's words gnawed at him, Sarah's obsession, Lily's confusion. But the locket wasn't a fantasy. It was real, tangible, a piece of his past. He opened his laptop, pulling up an old photo of Amelia, her smile bright under the starlight. Lily's eyes, her quiet intensity, echoed Amelia in ways that chilled him. Was it a coincidence or something more? As he stared at the city below, Julian felt a shift inside him. Lily wasn't just a mystery to solve. She was a child who'd chosen him, trusted him, in a world that had left her alone. Eleanor's arrival was a threat, a shadow creeping into the fragile bond they'd begun to build. He wouldn't let her take Lily, not without a fight. Tomorrow he'd press Mark for answers, but tonight he'd stand guard over the girl who'd brought light to his shadowed world. Her presence a quiet promise of something he couldn't yet name. Rain lashed against the penthouse's glass walls, the storm outside mirroring the unease that had settled in Julian Vance's chest since Eleanor Thompson's visit. The city's lights blurred into streaks beyond the windows, a restless backdrop to the quiet where Lily slept. Julian sat in his observatory, the telescope untouched, his mind replaying Eleanor's sharp-eyed smile and her too smooth story about Sarah's obsession. Lily's whispered distrust, "She's not like mommy," echoed in his ears, a child's instinct that matched his own. The silver locket, now back around Lily's neck, lay heavy in his thoughts, its star engraving a tether to a past he couldn't untangle. He needed answers, and Mark's call couldn't come soon enough. By midnight, the storm had worsened, thunder rumbling like a warning. Julian checked on Lily, finding her curled in the guest room, her small form dwarfed by the oversized bed. Her purple sweater lay folded nearby, the locket glinting on the nightstand. He adjusted her blanket, her steady breathing a fragile anchor in the chaos of his thoughts. Eleanor's claim, Sarah's supposed fixation on his tech empire, felt hollow. Lily's knowledge of his observatory, her mention of stars, wasn't the stuff of tabloid obsession. It was personal, intimate, tied to Amelia in ways that chilled him. As he returned to the living room, his phone buzzed. Mark's voice was gruff, urgent. "Eleanor Thompson's a mess," he said. "Gambling debts piling up. Casinos, loan sharks. She's been digging into you for months, Julian. Bank records, articles, even your college days. No record of her caring for Lily until Sarah died." Julian's grip tightened on the phone. "What about Sarah? Anything new?" Mark hesitated. "Still nothing tying her to you or Amelia. But Eleanor's no guardian. She's after something. I'll keep pushing." Julian hung up, his pulse racing. Eleanor wasn't family. She was a vulture circling Lily. But why? What did she know that he didn't? The locket, Sarah, Lily's haunting blue eyes. It all pointed to a truth just out of reach. Sleep eluded him, the storm's roar filling the penthouse. Around 2 a.m., a piercing scream shattered the night. Julian bolted to Lily's room, his heart pounding. She thrashed in her sleep, tears streaming down her pale face. "Don't drive so fast," she cried, her voice raw with terror. "Mommy, I'm scared." Julian knelt beside her, gently shaking her awake. "Lily, it's okay," he soothed, his voice steady despite his racing thoughts. Her eyes flew open, wide and glassy, searching the dark. She clung to him, her small body trembling. "The car. It was so loud," she sobbed. "Mommy said it was her fault." Julian froze, her words a blade through his chest. "What was her fault, Lily?" he asked softly, brushing damp hair from her face. She blinked, half dreaming, her voice a whisper. "Mommy Sarah said she made a mistake. The car, it hurt someone." Her eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion pulling her back to sleep, leaving Julian staring into the shadows. A car, a mistake. His mind flashed to Amelia's accident, the hit and run that stole her and their unborn child. Was it possible? No, it was too cruel, too impossible. Yet Lily's nightmare, Eleanor's scheming, and the locket's presence wove a thread of dread he couldn't ignore. Morning brought a gray, sodden city, the storm's remnants dripping from the penthouse windows. Lily sat at the kitchen counter, picking at cereal, her eyes still shadowed from the night's terror. Julian watched her, the locket around her neck a silent question. "Feeling better?" he asked, pouring her milk. She nodded, but her gaze was distant, her fingers tracing the locket star. "Mommy used to sing to me after bad dreams," she said softly. "She said you like songs about stars too." Julian's throat tightened, another echo of Amelia, who'd hummed constellations into his heart during college nights under the sky. How did Sarah know these things? Was she a friend of Amelia's he'd forgotten, a shadow from his past? He needed to act. "Lily, I'm going to make sure you're safe," he said, his voice firm. "No one's taking you away." Her small smile, tentative but trusting, stirred a protective fire in him. He texted Mark, "Find everything on Eleanor. Cross-check Sarah with Amelia's accident. No stone unturned." The thought that Sarah might be linked to that night was a betrayal he couldn't fathom, but he had to know. As Lily drew stars on her notepad, Julian paced, Eleanor's visit replaying in his mind. Her calculated grief, her hint at money troubles. It was a performance, not a plea. She wasn't here for Lily, she was here for leverage. But what did she know about Lily's connection to him? The locket, Sarah's secrets, Lily's nightmares. They were pieces of a puzzle that threatened to unravel everything he'd buried since Amelia's death. He glanced at Lily, her pencil moving with quiet focus, and felt a pang of something new. Fear not for himself, but for her. She'd chosen him, trusted him, and now a shadow loomed, threatening to tear her away. By evening, Mark's next report would come, but Julian already sensed the truth was darker than he'd imagined. Eleanor's arrival wasn't a coincidence. It was a move in a game he didn't yet understand. As Lily hummed softly, a tune eerily like one Amelia used to sing, Julian resolved to protect her, no matter the cost. The storm had passed, but another was brewing, a confrontation that would force him to face the past he'd run from for years. The morning sun pierced the penthouse's glass walls, but its warmth couldn't dispel the chill that had settled in Julian Vance's chest since Lily's nightmare. Her cries, "Don't drive so fast. Mommy said it was her fault," echoed in his mind, intertwining with Mark's report about Eleanor's gambling debts and her obsessive research into his life. Julian stood at the kitchen counter, coffee untouched, watching Lily color stars on her notepad, her locket glinting with each movement. The 5-year-old's quiet humming, eerily reminiscent of Amelia's old tunes, deepened the mystery that had upended his world. Eleanor's visit, her calculated grief, and Lily's haunting words about a car accident pointed to a truth Julian wasn't ready to face. But he couldn't wait any longer. He'd arranged a meeting with Eleanor at a quiet cafe downtown, far from Lily's curious eyes. "Stay with Anna today," he told Lily, referring to his trusted assistant. "I'll be back soon, okay?" Lily nodded, her blue eyes searching his face, the locket clutched tightly. "You won't let her take me, will you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Julian knelt, his heart twisting. "No one's taking you anywhere," he promised, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Her small smile, fragile but trusting, fueled his resolve. He left her with Anna, sketchbook in hand, and drove to the cafe, Mark's dossier on Eleanor tucked in his jacket, a weapon of truth against her lies. The cafe was a haven of soft lights and clinking cups, its warmth a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Julian's chest. Eleanor arrived, her gaunt frame wrapped in the same threadbare coat, her sharp eyes scanning the room before landing on him. "Mr. Vance," she said, her smile practiced, "I'm so grateful you're helping Lily." Julian didn't return the smile. He slid the dossier across the table, its pages detailing her gambling debts, loan shark ties, and months of research into his life. "Enough games, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and steady. "Tell me the truth. What do you want with Lily?" Her composure faltered, her fingers tightening around her purse. "I don't know what you mean," she stammered, but her eyes betrayed her, darting to the dossier. Julian leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "You're drowning in debt. You've been stalking my life. You're no guardian. You didn't even know Lily until Sarah died. What's your angle?" Eleanor's face paled, her lips parting as if to protest, but Julian pressed on, his voice cutting. "You know something about Lily, about Sarah. Tell me, or I'll go to the police." The cafe's hum faded as Eleanor's mask crumbled. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that turned heads. "You think you're so clever," she spat, her eyes blazing. "Fine. You want the truth? Lily's your daughter, Julian. Sarah's daughter. Your flesh and blood." The words hit like a physical blow, stealing Julian's breath. "Sarah loved you in college," Eleanor continued, her voice venomous. "A pathetic crush she never got over. When she got pregnant, she hid it, raised Lily alone. I figured it out after she died. A billionaire's kid? That's my ticket out of debt. I'd have bled you dry for years." Julian's world tilted. His daughter, Sarah, a shadow from his college days, barely a memory, a quiet girl in his study group, always on the edges. He shook his head, disbelief warring with a flicker of hope. "You're lying," he said, but his voice wavered. Eleanor smirked, leaning back. "Test her DNA if you don't believe me, but you know it's true. Those eyes, that locket, she's yours." The locket, Amelia's locket. The connection snapped into place. but it only deepened the puzzle. How did Sarah have it? What tied her to Amelia's death? I want proof, Julian said, his voice steel despite the chaos in his mind. A DNA test now. Eleanor shrugged, her confidence unnerving. Go ahead. It'll only confirm what I've said. Julian stood, the dossier in hand, his heart pounding. Stay away from Lily, he warned. This isn't over. He left the cafe, the city's noise a dull roar against his racing thoughts. Sarah, Lily's mother, his daughter. It was impossible. Yet the locket, Lily's eyes, her knowledge of his past, all pointed to a truth he couldn't deny. Back at the penthouse, Anna greeted him, but Lily's absence sent a jolt of panic through him. She's napping, Anna said, pointing to the guest room. Julian exhaled, finding Lily curled on the bed, the locket clutched in her sleep. He sank into a chair, staring at her, seeing his own features in her delicate face, the curve of her jaw, the shape of her eyes. His daughter. The thought was a lifeline in a wound, stirring a hope he hadn't dared feel since Amelia's death. He called his lawyer, arranging an urgent DNA test, his voice clipped but resolute. I need it done today, discreetly. As evening fell, Julian sat by Lily's side, her steady breathing a contrast to his turmoil. Eleanor's confession had torn open his world, but her motives, extortion, manipulation, sickened him. If Lily were his, he'd protect her at all costs. But Sarah's role, the locket, and Lily's nightmare about a car accident loomed like storm clouds. Was there more to Eleanor's story? Was Sarah's secret tied to the tragedy that stole Amelia? The answers were coming, and Julian braced himself, knowing the truth might shatter him anew. For now he watched Lily sleep, her locket a silent promise that he'd fight for her, no matter what lay ahead. The penthouse was a fortress of shadows, the city's lights beyond the glass walls a distant, mocking glow. Julian Vance sat in his study, the DNA test results trembling in his hands, their sterile printout a bomb waiting to detonate. Eleanor's venomous confession from the cafe, Lily, his daughter, born to Sarah, a fleeting figure from his college days, had left him reeling, suspended between disbelief and a fragile hope. The silver locket, resting on Lily's nightstand in the guest room, glinted under moonlight, its star engraving a cruel tether to Amelia's memory. Julian's heart pounded as he stared at the sealed envelope, delivered hours ago by a discreet courier. The truth was inside, but he wasn't sure he could bear it. Lily slept soundly, her small form curled under the purple blanket, unaware of the storm brewing in Julian's chest. Her quiet trust, her haunting blue eyes, so like Amelia's, had rooted him to her, despite Eleanor's scheming. The confrontation had left him raw. Eleanor's words, "She's your daughter, Julian," echoing alongside Lily's nightmare cries about a car accident and Sarah's guilt. He demanded the DNA test to silence Eleanor's lies. But deep down, he felt the truth in Lily's presence, in the locket's weight, in her uncanny knowledge of his past. He tore open the envelope, his breath hitching as he scanned the results. 99% probability of paternity. Lily was his. The words blurred as tears welled, unbidden in Julian's eyes. His daughter, a piece of him, born from a woman he barely remembered. Sarah Thompson, a quiet girl from his college study group, always lingered on the edges, her shy glances unnoticed in his ambition-fueled youth. How had she carried his child, hidden her for 5 years? The locket, Amelia's locket, burned in his mind. How had Sarah come to possess it? The questions churned, but another call from Mark, his investigator, shattered the silence. "Julian," Mark's voice was heavy. "I found something. It's about Sarah and Amelia's accident. You need to brace yourself." Julian's grip tightened on the phone, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell me," Mark exhaled, his words measured. "I dug into Sarah's history, cross-checked it with the hit-and-run that killed Amelia. Police never found the driver, but I got access to old traffic cam footage and hospital records. Sarah was in a minor crash the same night, same area. Admitted to a hospital with cuts and bruises, no charges filed. She was pregnant, Julian, early stages. Likely didn't know until later. The implication landed like a blow. "You're saying Sarah was the driver?" Julian's voice cracked, the room spinning. "It's almost certain," Mark said. "She fled the scene. The locket, maybe she found it at the crash site." Julian dropped the phone, his hands shaking as he stumbled to the window. Tears streamed down his face, hot and unrelenting, as the truth tore through him. Sarah, the mother of his daughter, had killed Amelia and their unborn child in that rain-soaked crash 7 years ago. The locket, a symbol of his love for Amelia, had been carried by the woman who destroyed his world, and now passed to Lily, his living legacy. The irony was a knife, twisting joy and agony together. Lily, sleeping innocently in the next room, was his daughter, but she was also the child of the person who'd stolen everything from him. He sank into a chair, the DNA results crumpled in his fist. Memories of Amelia flooded back. Her laughter under the stars, her dreams of teaching, her hand in his as they planned a future. Sarah's face, a vague shadow from college, merged with the horror of that night, the screech of tires, the wreckage. How had she taken the locket? Had she known whose life she'd ended? Julian's sobs were silent, his shoulders shaking as he buried his face in his hands. Lily was his, a miracle he hadn't dared imagine, but her existence was tied to his deepest wound. He stumbled to Lily's room, needing to see her, to ground himself. She slept peacefully, the locket glinting on the nightstand, its star a cruel reminder of the night that changed everything. Her face, so like his own, softened by sleep, was a mirror of his features and Amelia's spirit. He wanted to hate Sarah, to curse her for the pain she'd caused, but Lily's existence complicated that rage. She was innocent, a child who'd lost her mother, who'd chosen him on that cold cemetery path. His tears fell onto the blanket, each one a release of the grief he'd carried for years. Dawn crept through the windows, painting the room in soft grays. Julian wiped his eyes, the DNA results still clutched in his hand. Sarah's actions were unforgivable, yet Lily was a gift, a chance at redemption he hadn't sought. But could he love her fully, knowing her mother's sin? The question gnawed at him, a fracture in his heart. As Lily stirred, her eyes fluttering open, Julian forced a smile, hiding the storm within. "Morning, kiddo," he whispered, his voice thick. She yawned, reaching for the locket, unaware of the truth that had shattered him. The day ahead loomed heavy with decisions. Julian knew he couldn't face Lily without confronting the pain Sarah's actions had unearthed. Somewhere in her belongings, there might be answers. A letter, a clue to why Sarah had kept silent, why she'd given Lily the locket. For now, he'd protect his daughter, but the weight of her origins would test his heart in ways he couldn't yet fathom. The dawn light bled through the penthouse's glass walls, casting a pale glow over Lily's sleeping form. But Julian Vance found no solace in its warmth. The DNA results, crumpled on his desk, and Mark's revelation about Sarah's role in Amelia's death had shattered him, leaving his heart a battleground of love and betrayal. Lily, his daughter, slept peacefully in the guest room, her locket glinting on the nightstand, its star engraving a cruel reminder of the night that stole Amelia. Julian's tears had dried, but his distance grew, a coldness he couldn't shake as he watched Lily's innocent face. How could he love the child of the woman who destroyed his world? Days passed in a haze. Julian moved through the penthouse like a ghost, his interactions with Lily mechanical, breakfast prepared, questions answered, but his smiles were hollow. Lily noticed her blue eyes searching his, their usual spark dimmed by confusion. "Are you mad at me?" she asked one morning, her voice small as she clutched her locket, her purple sweater swallowing her small frame. Julian's chest tightened, guilt slicing through him. "No, kiddo," he lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But her frown deepened, and she retreated to her drawings, her silence louder than words. He hated himself for it, for letting Sarah's shadow poison the bond they'd built. The city hummed below, indifferent to Julian's turmoil. He avoided the observatory, its stars now tainted by memories of Amelia and the truth about Sarah. Eleanor's confession, that Lily was his, a secret Sarah hid, gnawed at him. But it was Sarah's role as the hit-and-run driver that cut deepest. He saw Amelia's face in Lily's, but also Sarah's guilt, a collision of joy and pain that left him adrift. He wanted to protect Lily, to keep his promise, but each glance at her stirred a rage he couldn't voice. Was he punishing her for her mother's sin? Desperate for clarity, Julian turned to Lily's worn backpack, left untouched since her arrival. Maybe it held answers, a clue to Sarah's silence, her motives. He waited until Lily napped, her soft snores filling the guest room, before unzipping the bag. Among tattered clothes and a small toy, he found a folded envelope, its edges yellowed, addressed to him in a shaky hand. His breath caught. Sarah's writing. He sank onto the couch, the city's lights a blur beyond the glass, and opened the letter, his hands trembling. "Julian," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Lily's found you. I'm sorry for everything." Sarah's words spilled out, raw and unfiltered. She confessed to the accident, the rain-slicked night when her car skidded, striking Amelia's. Panic had driven her to flee, her injuries minor, but her guilt eternal. She'd learned of Amelia's death later and then discovered her pregnancy, Julian's child, conceived during a fleeting college moment she'd cherished in silence. "I was too ashamed to tell you," she wrote. "I feared your hatred, but I couldn't taint Lily with my mistakes. She's innocent, Julian. Please love her. She's all I have left to give you." Tears blurred the page, Sarah's remorse a mirror to Julian's own guilt. She wasn't a villain, but a woman broken by her own choices, living in the shadow of a tragedy she couldn't undo. The locket, she explained, was found in the wreckage, a keepsake she'd kept for Lily, hoping it would one day lead her to Julian. "I named a star for her," Sarah wrote, "like you did for Amelia. I wanted her to have a piece of you." The letter ended with a plea. "Don't let my sin take her from you." Julian's sobs were silent, his shoulders shaking as he clutched the letter. Sarah's pain, her love for Lily, reframed her not as a monster, but as a mother who'd carried an unbearable burden. He looked toward Lily's room, her drawings of stars scattered on the coffee table, and saw the truth. Hating Sarah would only hurt Lily, the innocent heart of this tragedy. She wasn't just his daughter. She was a chance to heal, to rebuild what he'd lost. He'd chosen ambition over Amelia once, but he wouldn't choose anger over Lily. Wiping his eyes, Julian stood, the letter still in hand. He found Lily awake, sitting on the guest room floor, sketching a star with her purple crayon. Her eyes, wide and wary, met his. "You're sad again," she said softly, her locket glinting. Julian knelt beside her, his voice thick but steady. "I was, but not anymore." He took her small hand, feeling its warmth. "I'm here, Lily. I'm not going anywhere." Her tentative smile, a flicker of trust, was a lifeline. As evening fell, Julian carried Lily to the observatory, her small form light in his arms. The stars glittered above, a canvas of hope. He'd chosen forgiveness, not for Sarah alone, but for himself, for the years he'd let guilt define him. Lily pointed to a bright star, her voice soft. "Is that Mommy's star?" Julian nodded, his throat tight. "And Amelia's too. They're both watching you." The locket, once a symbol of loss, now held a new promise. A family forged not by blood alone, but by choice. Tomorrow he'd begin the legal fight to keep Lily, but tonight he held her close, ready to face whatever truths still lay ahead. The stars burned bright above the penthouse's observatory, their light filtering through the glass dome to bathe Lily in a soft glow. Julian Vance stood beside her, his heart still raw from Sarah's letter, its words of remorse and love etched into him. The previous night, he'd chosen forgiveness, not just for Sarah's tragic mistake, but for his own years of self-imposed isolation. Lily, his daughter, clutched her locket, its star engraving no longer a symbol of loss, but a bridge to a future he hadn't dared imagine. Her small hand rested in his, her trust a quiet anchor after weeks of turmoil. The city sparkled below, a canvas of possibility, and Julian felt something shift, a weight lifting, a purpose taking root. Lily's voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "Are we staying together now?" she asked, her blue eyes searching his, still shadowed by the fear of loss. Julian knelt, meeting her gaze. "Forever," he said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. I'm sorry I was distant, kiddo. I was figuring things out, but I'm here now. Her lips curved into a smile, small but radiant, and she hugged him, her locket pressing against his chest. The embrace was a promise, a vow he'd fight to keep. Sarah's letter had shown him Lily's innocence, her need for love untainted by the past, and he wouldn't let her down. The morning brought action. Julian called his lawyer, Thomas, his voice firm as he outlined his plan. Start the adoption process, and he said, temporary custody first, then permanent, whatever it takes. Thomas, accustomed to Julian's corporate battles, hesitated. This is a big step, Julian. The court will scrutinize everything. Your lifestyle, your past. Julian glanced at Lily, coloring stars at the kitchen counter, her purple sweater bright against the penthouse's stark decor. I know, he replied, but she's my daughter. I'll do whatever they need. Off-screen, Eleanor's fate loomed, her extortion scheme exposed, legal consequences inevitable. But Julian kept his focus on Lily, on healing, not revenge. He'd redecorated the guest room, now Lily's, with a soft purple wall and a bookshelf of children's stories, a small act to make the penthouse her home. Do you like it? He asked, showing her the room. Lily's eyes widened, her fingers tracing a book's spine. It's like Mommy's stories, she said, clutching the locket. She'd like this. The mention of Sarah no longer stung. It was a bridge to Lily's past, a part of her Julian would honor. He sat with her, reading a book about constellations, her laughter a sound he'd never tire of. The penthouse, once a cold fortress, was warming, its silence replaced by her voice. That afternoon, Julian took Lily to the observatory, her favorite place. She carried a drawing, two stick figures under a starry sky, one labeled Daddy, the other me. For you, she said, her shy smile a gift. Julian's throat tightened as he pinned it to the wall, beside a photo of Amelia he'd unearthed from storage. Thank you, kiddo, he said, his voice thick. He pointed to a bright star through the telescope. That's Amelia, he said. She's watching us. Lily tilted her head, her locket glinting. And Mommy Sarah? Julian paused, then smiled. She's there too, right beside her. They both gave me you, the greatest gift. The adoption hearing loomed, but Julian faced it with a clarity he hadn't known before. He met with Karen, a social worker who'd become an ally, to prepare. You've changed, Karen noted, reviewing his home adjustments, Lily's room, his reduced work hours. She's changed me, Julian admitted, watching Lily play nearby. The court granted temporary custody with a 6-month probation, but Julian saw it as a victory. Lily was his, legally and in his heart, her presence rewriting his story from one of loss to one of love. Weeks later, Julian took Lily to the cemetery, her small hand clutching a daisy from the park. The marble headstone, Evelyn Marie Crawford, 1985-2024. Love Remains stood quietly among ancient oaks. Lily knelt, placing the flower gently. Mommy, she whispered, I have Daddy now. You can rest. Julian's eyes stung, but he didn't hide his tears. Sarah's letter had shown him her love, her guilt, and he honored it by loving their daughter. She's happy, Lily said, standing, her certainty pure. Julian nodded, taking her hand. She is. As they walked back to the car, the late afternoon sun cast golden patterns across the grass. Lily's locket caught the light, a symbol of redemption, not pain. Julian looked down at her, her small hand firm in his, and felt a certainty he'd never known. His empire, his wealth, his past ambitions. They paled beside this child, this family born of choice and forgiveness. The city awaited them, its lights a promise of new beginnings. Julian lifted Lily into his arms, her laughter echoing as they headed home. A father and daughter bound by love, ready to face the stars together. If Julian and Lily's journey of forgiveness and love touched your heart, share your thoughts with us. How did their story resonate with you? Drop a comment below and let us know where you're listening from, whether it's a quiet evening or a bustling morning. Your reflections light up our storytelling path. Thank you for joining us in this tale of redemption, for letting these characters linger in your thoughts. Subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that stir the soul. Until we meet again under the stars, keep love close and hope closer.